taxpayers' removal, invoking provisions under the Local Authority Act. The petitioners are also calling for a thorough investigation into the conduct of Vermaak and any councillors who may have supported the suspensions, emphasizing concerns about the misuse of taxpayers' funds.
In more news from the local front, a 25-year-old Zimbabwean national was denied bail in the Rundu Magistrates Court after being arrested for conspiracy to commit fraud. Simon Takudzwa was arrested with 7 other Namibians who are being accused of forging and falsifying documents, amongst other charges.
According to court documents, the Zimbabwean national was deported from Namibia in 2023 but managed to get back in the country. It's alleged that the 7 Namibians issued official confirmation letters to Simon Takudzwa, a Zimbabwean citizen, to present the letters as part of the requirements at Home Affairs with the intent to acquire a Namibian full birth certificate and to aid or abet him to remain in Namibia. The Namibian suspects are local pastor 67-year-old Isaac Chukungwa, accused of issuing a baptism card, 74-year-old Petros Divingi, a headman of Sayema, is accused of issuing a letter of birth confirmation, and 48-year-old Johannes Hashela, accused of misrepresenting himself to be the biological father of the Zimbabwean national. Other Namibians being charged for conspiracy to commit the offense of fraud, among other charges, include 25 years of age Presita Ndara, said to be the girlfriend of the Zimbabwean national, 56-year-old Adriania Hausiku, an acting principal at a local primary school, accused of issuing a school testimonial, Paula Moses, who is a 26-year-old, a church secretary, as well as a 45-year-old Maria Haikera, accused of misrepresenting herself to be the biological mother of the Zimbabwean national. All 7 Namibians were granted bail of $4,000 each, and their next court appearance is set for the 14th of June 2025.
Now for news from across the borders, Ukraine has backed a U.S. proposal for a 30-day ceasefire, but there's no word yet on whether Russia will agree to it after 3 years of war. The breakthrough came after 9 hours of talks between U.S. and Ukrainian officials in Saudi Arabia. The White House says it's now up to Moscow to make peace. Al Jazeera has more.
For over 3 years, the war in Ukraine has raged. Tens of thousands killed, millions displaced, and resulting in Ukraine losing 20% of its territory to Russian forces. But now a stop to the fighting is within sight.
Today we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation.
President Zelensky was asked to leave the White House after a fallout with US President Donald Trump less than 2 weeks ago.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
Now the tone towards the Ukrainian side from the Americans has changed. Ukraine will sign a rare earth minerals deal to develop Ukraine's mineral wealth and has also accepted the US proposal for an immediate ceasefire.
Today, in that conversation, there was a proposal from the American side to take the first step right away and try to establish a complete ceasefire for 30 days, not only regarding missiles, drones and bombs, not only in the Black Sea, but also along the entire front line.
In return, the US will lift its suspension of military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine. It will allow Ukrainian forces to once again have information on Russian positions. The meeting in Saudi Arabia is just the first step, but it shows Ukraine has made the first move towards peace.
Ukraine is ready to accept, if Russia agrees to it, to introduce a 30-day ceasefire as the first step in order to start preparing some of the important documents to prepare for negotiations.
But on the streets of the Ukrainian capital Kyiv, the news was met with skepticism.
Russia is not ready to stop the war. There have been a few attempts at negotiations, but even during these talks, there were missiles being fired.
The United States says it will take the proposal to Russia.
Ukraine has agreed to it. and hopefully Russia will agree to it. We're going to meet with them later on today and tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be able to wipe out a deal. But I think the ceasefire is very important. If we can get Russia to do it, that'll be great. If we can't, we just keep going on and people are going to get killed, lots of people.
For now, everyone is waiting to see what happens next.
That's all the news we had for you at this hour. You can catch the next bulletin, that is at 10 o'clock on Namibia Connects, and also on 1 o'clock, only on NBC One. For now, we'll take a break, and when we come back, Denver Kisting and I officially cross over into the second hour of Good Morning Namibia. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back. Officially, this is the second hour of this beautiful Thursday edition of the nation's most read breakfast show, Good Morning Namibia. On my own behalf of all 3 million Namibians, Madam, thank you so much for bringing us the news at 7 and doing such a sterling job.
You're most welcome, Denver. Any day.
Yeah. Time still has this very sneaky habit of growing wings, seemingly out of the blue when fun is on the agenda.
Yeah.
It's an important hour, the second hour on a Thursday, because we start preparing for spiritual nourishment.
Of course.
That's also important to get us through tough times, to get us through good times as well. We must also do away with the notion that we only need nourishment when things are bad, when the stakes are high and the chips are low. But we also need nourishment when things are going well, so that we can retain that and have more of that.
Yeah, and that's one thing I love about Thursdays, especially our Thursdays right here on Good Morning Namibia, because they're religious Thursdays. But one thing about Thursdays also, it's called Throwback Thursday. Yes, and seeing that our Instagram page is up and lively. So this is for all of our viewers. If you've ever been on the Good Morning Namibia show, and if you've taken a picture with any of us, Denver, Ilago, Nicole, Dishishi, Lot, me, whoever it is that was even on the show back in the 90s. I'm joking. Yes. Please do post that picture today and do tag us on a GMN_NBC. Let's throw back some of those moments you've had with us on Good Morning Namibia.
I love that. We need to capture these memories because at the end of the day, those are the ones we hold on to.
Exactly. And you know, for our viewers, I don't think they know that it's okay for them to take pictures with us afterwards, you know, after the interviews, which is amazing. I mean, we are open. We are always ready to smile. I mean, we always look good, so we are ready to take pictures.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If time allows, and if we have a kind director. Because one has to admit that there are a number of kind directors, but we can't expect every single human being on the planet to be kind. Fortunately, this particular week, we have two incredibly kind directors.
Yes, and we're going to take pictures with them and we'll post them on our social media platforms.
So that people can see who's kind. Yeah.
Yes.
What's on the menu for this second hour?
That's right. We'll start off with NANSA spokesperson Jesse Abraham, who will be gauging us on the General Students' Council that the organization will be hosting on the 17th of March.
Equally scheduled for this hour, Senior Pastor Reverend Setson Dangwapo will be joining us in studio to talk to us about the role of faith in overcoming personal challenges.
That's right. We'll also have the captain of the Brave Gladiators, that is Lovisa Mulunga, who will be joining us in studio to talk to us about the Brave Gladiators Wellness Day that will be taking place sooner than later. And she'll basically just be joining us to give us all the details on that.
A second hour promising to burst at the seams with wholeness and greatness. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. The Namibia National Students Organization, NANSO, will be hosting a General Students' Council meeting that's from the 14th of March to the 17th of March 2025, with the official opening taking place on the 15th of March. The General Students' Council represents a critical component in NANSO's governance structure, which was established to ensure continuous democratic representation between the larger congressional meetings. To enlighten us more, I'm joined this morning by NANSO spokesperson Jesse Abraham. Good morning, Jesse, and welcome to Good Morning Namibia.
Good morning, Denver. Thank you so much for having me.
Are you well on this gift of a Thursday?
I am well. I hope you are well too.
I am indeed very well, thank you. Talk to us about this engagement. Give us an overview of the meeting, please.
The General Students' Council is essentially NANSO's version of a family meeting. In layman's terms, this is where we come together as NANSO and we discuss how far we are in fast-tracking our advocacy pillars that we declared and we pledged to at our elective Congress last year in July. So this is where we come together as a national structure and together with our regional structures to see how our regions are doing, what can we do right now, and what are the immediate interventions that need our attention to ensure that the realization of our advocacy is met.
How often do you have these family meetings?
It is the General Students' Council happens in between every elective Congress, so every 6 months.
Is there any particular matter on this specific family meeting agenda?
Definitely. We are definitely excited, particularly this year, to address and to see the realization of one of our advocacy pillars, which is sustainable higher education funding. We want to look into the fast-tracking and the possible implementation of our education levy, which speaks to us harnessing our mineral wealth as a country to fund higher education.
Against the backdrop of that focus, talk to us about the plans that you have for 2025. That's an important year on so many levels.
It is definitely on so many levels. As NANSO, we are very excited, particularly, like I mentioned before, our programming and our initiatives are always targeted towards the advocacy pillars that we pledged to last year. So definitely we're excited to look into the higher education sustainable funding. We're excited to see how we can enhance the TVET sector in light of the green hydrogen, but the TVET sector in itself as a sector and the opportunities it can present for our trainees in the sector.
The levy has been long in the making and the advocacy around that. And we do know that we need to rethink our approach around sustainable funding of our higher education, in fact, of our education sector in general. What is NANSO's plan should the levy not come to pass this time around yet?
This time around yet is never really, it's one of something like the education levy is more than just an advocacy pillar. This is one of NANSO's pipeline dreams. And as seen with the current or the recently released NASFAF provisions that have changed, that was one of NANSO's pipeline dreams. So as NANSO, it's never really ours to really give up. In fact, it's not an option. We must come to a point where we do realize that these things can come true, whether it's persistence. But we also understand as an organization that some of these timelines need to be realistic. A lot of policy changes take a long time, 5 years, 10 years even. But our point remains is we must remain persistent to ensure that one day, maybe not us to enjoy, but the next generation must enjoy the education levy.
Jesse, we have to acknowledge that so much has happened thus far in 2025 already that we were barely able to take stock of what transpired in 2024 and how we're going to shift our gears. But can we briefly reflect from NANSO's perspective, which were the key obstacles that you encountered in 2024 and how are you working at addressing those this time around?
One of our key challenges that we faced as NANSO is when we do our programs such as the Access to Education campaign or the Examination Readiness campaign where we go out into the regions, one of our key struggles has been really reaching the isolated and the rural areas. We have reached a few. We have gone as far as the Namibia-Angola border on the Totala Combined School, for instance. This year we went to Gibeon, somewhere we have never been. So we are really trying to mitigate this by also engaging our directorates on a regional level to perhaps gain access to the government vehicles so they are then able to reach these isolated areas. Another key obstacle has also been funding. We are a non-profit organization, but there are numerous, in fact, a lot of students and trainees who reach out to us asking for funding, be it tuition fees, registration fees, and we are unable to cater to these students, unfortunately, because we are a non-profit organization. But one thing we are doing to mitigate is to reintroduce, we had a NANSO marathon last year, the EduRun Marathon, and what we want to do this year is reintroduce it as a fundraising marathon.
Now, I would imagine that the challenges that the urban student or pupil faces would differ from the challenges that someone faces in Gibeon.
Yes.
Talk to us about the battles that those students fight and how you also plan to come to their aid.
Evidently, it is definitely visible in the NSSC results, even if we look at basic and secondary education, for instance. Some of our best performing schools come from regions where they are constantly in dilapidated classrooms, for instance. But then again, we look at what systems are they using that work for them despite these infrastructural issues. So we are able to identify some of these things and we're able to then advise our other regional structures to then implement these, such as the compulsory study, for instance, especially that is more common in the northern schools that have more of a boarding school system. So we're able to identify these issues and see what works where, what can work where, so that we're able to also have somewhat of a uniform statistic, because right now there's a big divide, so to say, between our rural and urban schools, not just in terms of performance, but in terms of efficiency as well.
Let's return to the family meeting. So as a vessel, as a vehicle for implementation, how does it contribute to the growth and development of the organization, firstly, but also the implementation of the plans that you have for a particular year or for a particular period?
The GSC is particularly important for us because this is where we even hold ourselves accountable. We are able to then map out. It is more than just a discussion of what are the issues, but generally this is where we come together and map what can be done now, what can work in the next 5 years, what is sustainable, how can we then fast check that these expectations and these deadlines we have set for ourselves are met, and what else can we bring on board to better enhance our education.
Do you invite any of the stakeholders to the family meeting as well, or is it limited to the national and regional family members?
For our closed session, it is limited to the members of GSC, who are the people who form part of the NANSO leadership. But for our official opening, we have made it particularly paramount. For instance, our guest list for the official opening is most, if not all, members of the Student Representative Council, members from the various tertiary institutions and the VTCs. So it's more than just the NANSO members that are there. It's also our SRCs, it's our LRCs, because we do want and we believe in an informed position. So when we engage on government level, we have engaged the necessary students from the various institutions to say, this is what the students at UNAM are saying, this is what the nursing students at IK are saying, what is the way forward. This is the issue at hand.
Is the GSC also a self-review platform where you take a look at your own efficiencies and perhaps inefficiencies and assess NANSO's effectiveness?
Definitely. This is where we are able to assess what are some of our programs, for instance, that were done 5 years ago that no longer work now. How can we fine-tune them, perhaps not get rid of them, but that then speak now to the current aspirations of education and the young people currently?
It's one thing to be assertive in one's approach if you advocate for certain courses. At the same time, you need to collaborate and not antagonize those who are responsible ultimately for the implementation of what you wish to see implemented. Talk to us about how you value collaboration and cooperation, particularly with key stakeholders.
In NANSO, we have a saying that everyone is a stakeholder in education. So our stakeholders begin from a parent to a private sector entity to government. So definitely we do value indeed collaboration. I think we are nothing without collaboration. This is why it's very important that even in our program, we involve even our parents, for instance, in the Fix My School campaign, where we call on to parents, if you have a learner at the school and you have realized that your child complains about a broken chair and you perhaps own a mechanical shop, how can you assist? Definitely. So then that's where we come in to say that, you know what, everyone is a stakeholder in education and we engage all of them equally, and we are proud that a lot of parents have come on board. A lot of small businesses that are just starting up, for instance, in carpentry, have approached us to assist us in our programming. So we are very excited to meet some of our stakeholders at the GSC and how we can forge a relationship that lasts forever.
What I'm hearing you say, it's about ownership. If I can fix the broken chair, why not fix it? Yeah. Just any final thoughts before we let you go this morning?
We really just encourage the public to tune in. We will be live streaming the GSC. And perhaps for our students from the various tertiary institutions, if you do know of an SRC who will be attending our GSC, to perhaps then send through your thoughts through them. But nonetheless, we are always a call away.
Thank you so much, and best of luck. May it be a resounding success. May it be constructive in its nature.
Thank you so much, Denver.
It was NANSO's spokesperson, Jesse Abram, talking to us about the General Students' Council meeting that will be taking place this coming weekend. Good morning, maybe we'll return after a break.
When your skin needs a nourishing boost, start your day with Satiskin's Nourishing Cream Body Wash. Enriched with 5 moisturizing oils and glycerine, it revitalizes your skin and your senses. Satiskin Cream Body Wash. Boost your day.
Hello, you're watching Initiative Africa.
Here it is, a museum that talks about the presence of the African experience.
Your weekly magazine featuring Africa on the move through smart innovations and initiatives that work.
It's always a pleasure to put a smile on the children's faces.
Life is full of obstacles that can seem insurmountable at times, whether it's dealing with personal loss, navigating health struggles, or facing unexpected hardships. The journey through these challenges can actually feel overwhelming. And in the midst of these trials, many turn to their faith for strength and guidance. And to discuss more on that, we're joined by Reverend Sister Ndahangwapo. Reverend, a very good morning, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Ndapewa. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much, and I appreciate the honor to be here.
All right.
And good morning, Namibia.
Amazing. Just to get into it, Reverend, how can we understand the distinction between God's grace and His mercy, and why is it important to grasp both of them?
Yeah, actually, in the first place, I must say I love the statement that you used in the beginning about people turning to faith during personal struggles and that.
Yes.
In answering your second question, I must say that, first of all, I want to say that faith is not really something that should be viewed as the last resort that people tend to when life brings undesirable things. But it should be a day-to-day life, because we know that the Bible says the just shall live by faith. Now, as to your second, your real question now regarding the issues of grace. Well, grace, practically, it is defined as God's unmerited favor. That's grace. And on the other side, mercy is God's kindness. Grace is actually getting what you do not deserve, while mercy is actually not getting what you deserve. That's actually a simple distinction between the two, grace and mercy.
When do you know you're getting what you deserve, and when do you know you're not getting what you do not deserve?
Okay, well, beginning with a perspective of humility, that way where we look at our side and know that, man, there are just certain things in life, we call them graces, that I do not deserve. For example, certain situation in which the Lord just spare us, whether it's accidents or that's now in the terms of salvation, and other things that are just there in life that we know that, man, I would not deserve this otherwise. And so you know that, man, I'm getting what I do not deserve. For example, life. From the human perspective, we know that people live, but our lives are different. We live spiritually. And so because of that now, we know that we're actually getting something that we do not deserve. Whether it's a physical life or a spiritual life, we know that grace then signifies that we are getting what we do not deserve.
All right. After receiving grace, how should our lives change? Is grace meant to be received passively, or should it lead to perhaps some form of action?
Yeah, well, grace being what I call a universal need, and actually every human that exists on this earth's need, we should basically receive grace. And as we receive this grace, then the Bible will help us to understand that grace must trigger a response from our side, which means that it teaches gratitude. So we're no longer able to live as we please or as we want, but we are living for one that actually has purchased life for us and died on our behalf, and that's Jesus Christ. And practically, just to be more clear, there is a quote, if I can just read it quickly here from 2 Timothy chapter 2. And it helps us to understand that grace is actually a teacher, because he says, "For the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men, teaching us that So it has appeared to all men. It's everybody. That's the goodness of God. Teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present age, looking for the blessed hope and glorious appearing of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us, that he might redeem us from every lawless deed and purify for himself his own special people, zealous for good works. So grace should trigger good works in us, and grace is a very good teacher. It teaches us the kindness of God and how to live in response to what the Lord has actually done for us. There's just more that we will not be able to speak in this space of time.
Yeah. From what you just said right now, is it possible for one to fall out of grace, or for perhaps God to withdraw his grace? And also, what does the Bible say in terms of that?
Yeah, I like the question, because there is actually somehow an idea that the person can fall from grace. Now, to give a clear biblical understanding, really, that falling from grace, it's taken from the reality where there were people who were pursuing the law, and they believed that by the deeds of the law they would be saved. So then the Bible then helps us to understand. This is Paul helping believers to understand, saying that, well, what it is then, by turning to the law, you have fallen from grace. So he is not saying that God has withdrawn his grace, but rather a person who has turned their back from the grace that is available for them. So because it's not possible to exhaust the grace of God, is always available.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there such a thing as too much grace sometimes from people?
As in too much grace to
when
give?
Extending, yes, when extending to others.
Well, I don't think so.
Okay.
Because, as I said, grace is actually the greatest need. Everybody need grace. We need God's grace. Other people need our grace. And I want to tell you, some of the most great people you can find are people who live their life in greatness and kindness toward others. Their words, as they speak, you can sense that grace in there. That, man, this person, though they might not be happy with what I'm doing, you can sense that grace from their dealing and their communication with you. So I would not really say, especially in our generation, grace we can't give too much grace for others. I think we probably just give what is sufficient, or we will lack in our grace toward others. That's usually the case.
All right. Apart from the too much grace, what are some of the misunderstandings that are there when it comes to grace? And also, how can we correct that through the biblical lens?
Okay. Well, some of the misunderstanding that will be there is usually that grace give people some kind of a license to do what we want to do. Now, and usually people will lean more to the grace of God instead of righteousness. So now, what happens is that we mistaken grace, which is an opportunity God has given us. And when you see a person living long, even though they may not be living a life that is pleasing before the Lord, and we wonder, what's happening? Well, it's actually grace. And it's not, God is not saying that, well, now you can do what you want to do and wait for the day before you die, or your last moment before you die for you to turn to God. But practically, it's an opportunity where we experience the favor and the kindness and the goodness of God. That's really what the grace ought to be. Even in the difficult moments that we spoke about in the beginning, grace ought to be that reality of life that help us to know that as I'm going through some of these circumstances of my life, God's goodness, God's support, God's kindness and God's help is available for me during those moments. However, we need to not take it for granted. In other words, it's not really, it will never be a license.
All right.
Yes.
Well, Reverend, perhaps before we let you go, what are some of your words of grace to our viewers this morning?
Well, I would probably encourage, the first thing is, we have been given grace. The Bible says, for the grace of God has appeared to all men. For me, it's really, it's touching deeply when it says it's appeared. No one is exempt. It doesn't matter what state of life they are in. God's grace is reaching to every human being and every humankind. And because of that, knowing that His grace has appeared to everybody, no one is excluded, that should really position us, put us in a place where we would want to take advantage of this grace. That, well, I will begin to think of what we call, because grace is done. In other words, it is done. I will begin to think of what is done for me in relation to how I live my life. I will surrender my heart to the one that cares for me, because the Lord can only help us. He can only make our life much better. That's the goodness of God. So if I can implore and encourage somebody today, is receive the grace and the mercies of a living God. Mercies, in God's mercy, He delays His judgment on our sins. And that's just how great a heart the Lord is. That would be my words of grace this morning to all the people, whether they are believers or yet to come to faith. That will be, take advantage of the grace that God has given us.
All right. Well, Reverend, it's been amazing talking to you. Thank you so much for engaging us this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dapeo, and thank you to the listeners. May the Lord bless you.
All right. Well, you heard it right there from Reverend Setsenda Hangwapo talking to us about grace this morning. We continue off with our hour that is on religious matters.